Picture this. It's a quiet afternoon in the Hidden Leaf Village, sunlight pouring gold over the rooftops, the Hokage monument standing tall against the clear blue sky like it always has, like it always will. Everything about this day feels ordinary. Peaceful, even. But if you've been watching this series long enough, you already know, in Konoha, ordinary never lasts. Because today, Naruto Uzumaki is about to stumble across a secret that his own father buried so deep, so carefully, that even the most trusted shinobi of the village never dared speak its name out loud. Before we dive in, if you're new here, welcome to the channel. Hit that subscribe button and ring the bell, because this series is about to get wild, and you don't want to miss a single chapter. Now let's get into it. The Hokage Archive Vault sits beneath the main tower, accessible only through 3 separate security checkpoints, and a chakra signature lock keyed to a short list of approved shinobi. It is not a place people wander into by accident. Scrolls line every wall, mission records dating back generations, forbidden techniques sealed away for the safety of the village, personal effects of Hokage long past. It is, in every sense, a room built to keep secrets. And Naruto Uzumaki has absolutely no business being there. But he is there anyway, because Naruto being where he shouldn't be is basically a rite of passage at this point, isn't it? Some things never change. Except this time, it isn't mischief that brought him down here. It's grief, dressed up as curiosity. It started 3 days earlier, when Naruto asked Kakashi, almost offhandedly, almost like it didn't matter, whether there were any records of his father's personal training. Not missions, not battles everyone already knew about. Just Minato alone, working on something for himself. Kakashi had gone quiet in that particular way he does when a question lands somewhere he doesn't want it to. He'd said there might be archived materials, but that accessing them required Hokage-level clearance. Naruto is not Hokage. Not yet anyway. But Naruto has clones. And Naruto has patience when it counts, even if nobody ever believes that about him. So today, while the acting administrative staff rotates shifts and the vault sits under lighter supervision than usual, Naruto slips down the back stairwell with a shadow clone standing lookout and another already dispelled, having scouted the guard patterns an hour earlier. He isn't proud of it. But he isn't turning back either. The vault room is colder than the rest of the tower, the air carrying that particular staleness that comes from paper and ink kept away from sunlight for years at a time. Naruto moves along the shelves slowly, his fingers trailing over labeled scroll cases, most of them meaning nothing to him. Clan techniques, sealed jutsu with warning tags, mission archives from wars fought before he was born. Then he sees it, a small wooden chest, tucked into the corner of a shelf reserved for personal effects of past Hokage. The nameplate reads, Minato Namikaze, Personal Research. Naruto's breath catches. He has seen so little that belonged to his father. A few photographs. Jiraiya's stories. The image burned into the village's collective memory of the man who gave his life to seal away the 9 tails. But personal research? Something private, something Minato worked on just for himself, away from the eyes of the village? Naruto doesn't hesitate. He kneels, lifts the lid, and finds a modest collection of items inside, a cracked kunai holster, a faded photograph of Kushina laughing at something off-frame, a stack of old training notes in handwriting so precise it looks almost like calligraphy, and beneath all of it, wrapped separately in a protective cloth, a single scroll. Unlike the others in the vault, this one has no official seal, no mission classification, no clan crest. Just a plain wax stamp pressed with the symbol of the Rasengan itself, and beneath it, in Minato's own hand, 6 words that will change the next several months of Naruto's life. Rasengan, forbidden variant, sealed by order. Order of whom, the scroll doesn't say. But Naruto has a sinking feeling he already knows. He unrolls it carefully, cross-legged on the vault floor, clones standing guard just outside the door. The first few lines are technical, chakra shape theory, spinning ratios, notes on nature transformation layering that Naruto only half understands. But the tone shifts a few paragraphs in. It stops reading like research and starts reading like a warning written to himself. The theoretical ceiling of the Rasengan has not been reached. I am certain there is a 4th stage, one that fuses elemental nature, sage chakra, and Abija's power into a single technique. I believe it is possible. I no longer believe I should be the one to complete it. Naruto reads that line 3 times. I no longer believe I should be the one to complete it. His father. The fourth Hokage. The man who invented the Rasengan itself, who fought Kurama to a standstill, who is spoken about in the village with something close to reverence, writing, in his own hand, that he gave up. That he chose to stop. Why would someone that strong write something like that? There's more, but the ink here is smudged, water damaged in places, like the scroll had been handled, or cried over, more than once. Naruto can make out fragments. Backlash. Pathways ruptured. Could have lost the arm entirely. Too dangerous to continue alone. And then, near the very bottom, a final line that Naruto reads with his stomach twisting into a knot. If Naruto ever finds this, I hope he has the wisdom I did not. For a long moment, Naruto just sits there, scroll in hand, the cold of the vault floor seeping up through his knees. He came down here looking for a piece of his father. He didn't expect to find a warning addressed directly to him. But if you know anything about Naruto Uzumaki, and if you've followed this channel for even one episode, you know that a warning has never once in his life been the same thing as a stop sign. If anything, it sounds like a challenge. He almost doesn't hear the footsteps. By the time the vault door creaks open behind him, Naruto barely has time to roll the scroll back into its cloth and shove it half beneath his jacket before Jiraiya steps inside. One hand already raised in a gesture that says don't even think about running. I had a feeling, Jiraiya says, voice low, eyes scanning the open chest, the disturbed cloth, the scroll poorly hidden against Naruto's ribs. Kakashi mentioned you'd been asking questions. I should have known you wouldn't wait for permission. Rasengan, Naruto starts, guilt written all over his face, though it doesn't stop him from keeping one hand pressed protectively over the scroll. Don't. Jiraiya's voice isn't angry, exactly. It's heavier than that. Tired in a way Naruto doesn't often hear from him. Do you have any idea what you're holding? I know it's Dad's, Naruto says. I know it's about the Rasengan. That's all I know. Rasengan, why would he write that he shouldn't be the one to finish it? He's the strongest shinobi this village ever had. Jiraiya is quiet for a long moment, studying the boy in front of him. Not a boy anymore, not really, not after everything he's been through, but in moments like this, Jiraiya still sees a kid who lost a father he never got to meet, chasing pieces of him wherever he can find them. Put the scroll back, Jiraiya finally says. Not until you tell me what happened. Naruto, you knew about this. It isn't a question. Naruto's voice has an edge to it now, something between hurt and frustration. You knew he tried to make something stronger than the Rasengan, and nobody ever told me. Jiraiya exhales slowly, running a hand down his face. There's a version of this conversation where he lies, where he tells Naruto it's nothing, an old failed experiment, not worth another thought. But Jiraiya has never been good at lying to this particular kid, not when it actually matters. It's not something nobody told you because we didn't think you deserved to know, Jiraiya says. It's something we didn't tell you because your father almost died trying to make it work, and I am not about to be the man who hands you the instructions to repeat his mistake. The words land harder than Naruto expects. He looks down at the scroll in his hands like it's suddenly heavier. Almost died? That's all I'm going to say about it right now, Jiraiya says, and this time his voice leaves no room for argument. Put it back, Naruto. Whatever you think you're going to prove by finishing what he started, it isn't worth what it cost him to walk away from it. For a moment, Naruto looks like he might actually argue. His jaw sets, his grip tightens on the scroll, and there's a flicker in his eyes that Jiraiya recognizes instantly. The exact same stubborn fire Minato used to get right before he did something reckless and brilliant in the same breath. But then, slowly, Naruto nods, and places the scroll back into the chest. Jiraiya watches him do it, and for a second, something in his shoulders eases. He claps a hand on Naruto's shoulder, firm and warm. Good, he says. Now get out of here before someone actually catches you. I'll pretend this never happened. This once. Naruto manages a weak grin. Thanks, Rasengan. Don't thank me. Just listen to me, for once in your life. They leave the vault together, Jiraiya resealing the door behind them, and if this were a simpler story, that would be the end of it. Lesson learned. Warning heeded. Chapter closed. But you already know Naruto better than that. And so, frankly, does Jiraiya, which is exactly why, as they walk back up the stairwell, he can't shake the uneasy feeling that he hasn't seen the last of that scroll. He's right to worry. Because what Jiraiya doesn't know, what nobody in that vault room noticed, is that in the handful of seconds between hearing footsteps and hiding the scroll against his ribs, Naruto did something else entirely. He made a single, silent shadow clone, invisible in the low light of the vault, tucked behind the shelving unit. And that clone did exactly what shadow clones are built to do best. It memorized every single word. That night, back in his apartment, Naruto sits at his kitchen table with a blank notebook and a pencil, the shadow clone's memories flooding back into him the moment he dispelled it earlier in the stairwell. Word for word, he begins recreating the scroll from memory, the chakra-shape theory, the notes on nature transformation layering, the warnings about pathway ruptures, all of it. It isn't perfect. Some technical diagrams are hard to reconstruct purely from memory, certain characters blurred by the water damage even the clone couldn't parse clearly. But the bones of it are there, enough for Naruto to understand the shape of what his father attempted. He stares at the page for a long time before writing, beneath everything else, the same line that struck him hardest down in the vault. If Naruto ever finds this, I hope he has the wisdom I did not. Underneath it, in his own messy handwriting, Naruto adds a single line of his own. I don't know about wisdom, Dad. But I've got stubbornness. Maybe that'll be enough. He closes the notebook, sets it beside his bed, and lies awake far longer than he should, staring at the ceiling, thinking about pathway ruptures and near-fatal backlash and a father he never got to meet who apparently once stood exactly where Naruto is standing now, at the edge of something powerful enough to be worth fearing. Jiraiya told him to let it go. But somewhere between the vault and his apartment, between almost died and I hope he has the wisdom I did not, Naruto has already made up his mind. He isn't going to let it go. He's going to finish what his father started. The next morning, Team 7's training ground is unusually quiet. Sakura arrives first, stretching out the tension in her shoulders from a long shift at the hospital the day before. Dressed simply and practically for training, nothing fancy, just her usual gear, sleeves down, focused entirely on the day ahead. Sasuke isn't back in the village yet, still off on his extended mission, though word is he's due to return sooner rather than later. It's just Naruto and Sakura today, and Kakashi, running characteristically late as always. But something's different about Naruto, and Sakura clocks it almost immediately. You're quiet, she says, eyeing him as he sits on a training post, notebook tucked under one arm like he's guarding something. You're never quiet. What's going on with you? Nothing, Naruto says, a little too fast. Sakura's eyes narrow. She's known this knucklehead since they were kids, she can read him better than almost anyone, and nothing has never once meant nothing when it comes out of his mouth like that. Naruto. It's really nothing, Sakura-chan. I just didn't sleep much, that's all. He forces a grin, the kind that's just a little too wide, a little too bright to be entirely convincing. Big plans today? Training, you know? Gotta get stronger. You're always training, Sakura says slowly. This is different. You've got that look. What look? The look you get right before you do something incredibly reckless. Naruto laughs it off, waving a hand, and thankfully, or perhaps not so thankfully, depending on how you look at it, Kakashi arrives at that exact moment, effectively ending the conversation before Sakura can dig any deeper. But she doesn't forget the exchange. She tucks it away, the way she tucks away most things about Naruto that don't quite add up, filing it under things to keep an eye on. If she only knew. Training that day is unremarkable on the surface. Sparring drills, chakra control exercises, the usual rhythm of Team 7 functioning at partial strength. But Naruto's mind is elsewhere the entire time. Every spare moment, his thoughts drift back to the notebook waiting in his apartment, to the reconstructed scroll, to a technique his father deemed too dangerous to finish. He knows what Jiraiya told him. He knows what putting that scroll back was supposed to mean, but knowing something and accepting it have never been quite the same thing, not for Naruto Uzumaki. That evening, after training wraps and Sakura heads home, still throwing one last suspicious glance over her shoulder at him, Naruto makes his way to a secluded training ground on the outskirts of the village, one of the more remote clearings, far enough from prying eyes that even his sensei rarely bothers to check it. He sits beneath a tree, pulls out his reconstructed notes, and begins reading through them properly for the first time, no longer rushing, no longer hiding from footsteps in a vault. The theory, as best as Naruto can piece together, goes something like this. The standard Rasengan is a sphere of pure, unshaped chakra, spun and compressed without relying on elemental nature transformation. That's what made it revolutionary in the first place. A technique that didn't require a bloodline or years of nature manipulation training to use. But Minato's notes suggest he believed there was another tier beyond that. A version that did incorporate elemental nature, wind, specifically, given his own affinity, layered directly into the spinning core rather than applied afterward like the Rasen Shuriken. And beyond even that, a tier that folded in Sage Chakra, drawing on the natural energy of the world itself. And beyond that, the tier that seems to have been the true, final ambition, one that included a controlled thread of Tailed Beast Chakra. 3 separate energy sources, Naruto realizes slowly, tracing the diagrams with his finger. Elemental. Natural. Bijou. All spun together into a single technique. No wonder it went wrong. No wonder his father, a man capable of things that still make grown shinobi's jaws drop in awe, looked at this and decided it wasn't worth the risk. But here's the thing about Naruto that his father, for all his brilliance, never quite got the chance to understand firsthand. Naruto doesn't have just one of those 3 energy sources sitting inside him, waiting to be theoretically accessed through years of careful, isolated study. He has practically all of them, already, right now, today. He's mastered Sage Mode. He carries Kurama's chakra as an active, willing partner rather than a sealed prisoner, and his own natural affinity, honed over years of training, gives him more raw material to work with than his father ever had access to at the same stage of his life. Where Minato had theory and raw genius, Naruto has something his father never did. He has all 3 pieces already in his hands. He just has to figure out how to put them together without blowing his own arm off in the process. Naruto leans back against the tree, staring up at the darkening sky through the branches, notebook clutched to his chest, and for the first time since finding that scroll, something other than grief and curiosity settles into his expression. Something sharper. Something familiar to anyone who's watched this knucklehead take on impossible odds again and again and again throughout his entire life. Determination. Sorry, Rasengan, he mutters to the empty clearing, a small, crooked grin spreading across his face. Guess I never was much good at listening. Somewhere far above him, wind stirs through the leaves, and Naruto swears, just for a second, it almost sounds like his father laughing. 3 days after the vault incident, Jiraiya finds himself standing outside Naruto's apartment at an hour far too early for either of their liking. A small bag of onigiri in one hand and a look on his face that suggests he already knows exactly what he's going to find when Naruto opens the door. He's right, of course. He usually is, when it comes to this particular student. Naruto answers looking like he hasn't slept properly in days, hair even messier than usual, eyes a little glassy, a notebook visible on the kitchen table behind him that he closes just a fraction too quickly when he notices Jiraiya's gaze drift toward it. Rasengan. Naruto's voice carries a forced casualness that fools absolutely nobody. What are you doing here so early? Making sure you actually put that scroll back where it belonged, Jiraiya says, stepping past him into the apartment without waiting for an invitation, the way he always has. And judging by the look of you, I'd say I was right to worry. I put it back. You watched me put it back. I watched you put the scroll back, Jiraiya says, settling onto a low stool at the kitchen table, eyes flicking toward the notebook again. I never said anything about whatever's in that. Naruto's shoulders tense. For a second, it looks like he might actually try to bluff his way out of it. Deny everything, play dumb, the way he might have at 12 years old. But something in Jiraiya's expression stops him. It isn't anger. It's something heavier, something almost resigned, like a man watching history repeat itself in exact, painful detail and knowing there isn't a single thing he can do to stop it. I made a clone, Naruto admits quietly, sitting down across from him. Before you found me. It memorized the whole thing. I wrote it all back down last night. Jiraiya closes his eyes for a long moment. Of course you did, he mutters, more to himself than to Naruto. Of course you did. Rasengan, I have to know, Naruto says, leaning forward, the exhaustion in his face giving way to something more urgent. Why did he stop? He wrote that he didn't think he should be the one to finish it. What happened to him? For a long moment, Jiraiya says nothing at all. He looks down at the untouched onigiri in the bag between them, at the early morning light slanting weakly through Naruto's kitchen window, at anything except the boy across from him whose father he watched die with his own eyes. You're not going to let this go, are you? Jiraiya finally says. It isn't really a question. No, Naruto answers simply. I'm not. Jiraiya exhales, long and slow, the sound of a man giving in to something he knows is probably a mistake but no longer has the heart to fight. Alright, he says. Alright. You want the whole story, I'll give you the whole story, but you're going to sit there and listen to every word of it before you decide whether you still want to walk down this road. Deal? Naruto nods immediately. Deal. And so, in the quiet of that small kitchen, with the morning sun climbing slowly over Konoha's rooftops, Jiraiya begins to tell a story he has kept to himself for well over a decade. Your father, Jiraiya begins, was, without question, the single most naturally gifted shinobi I have ever trained. I've said that to you before, and I meant it every time, but genius like that comes with a particular kind of danger, because when you're that talented, you start believing there isn't a wall you can't eventually break through. Given enough time. Enough effort. Enough stubbornness. Naruto listens, quiet, hands wrapped around a cup of tea he hasn't touched. He invented the Rasengan when he was young, younger than you'd think, honestly, for something that complex. Took him 3 years, working almost entirely alone, iterating over and over on chakra shape manipulation until he cracked something nobody else in shinobi history had managed. A technique that didn't rely on hand seals. Pure chakra control and shape manipulation, refined into something devastating. I know that part, Naruto says. You taught me the Rasengan. I know how hard it is. You know how hard the finish technique is, Jiraiya corrects gently. You don't know what it cost him to build it in the first place, because the moment he finished it, the actual moment he held that first stable Rasengan in his palm, do you know what he said to me? Naruto shakes his head. He said, this isn't the ceiling. This is just the first floor. The words hang in the small kitchen for a moment, and Naruto feels something tighten in his chest. Recognition, maybe, of a way of thinking that sounds uncomfortably familiar to his own. Most people, Jiraiya continues, would have taken a technique like the Rasengan, perfected it, taught it to a handful of trusted students, and considered their life's work done. Your father wasn't most people. The moment the Fourth Great Ninja War tension started rising and he became Hokage, he started disappearing for hours at a time, in between his duties, working on something he wouldn't tell even me about at first. What was he trying to do? He believed the Rasengan, as devastating as it already was still fundamentally incomplete, Jiraiya says, because it was built entirely on shape manipulation, pure chakra, no elemental nature woven into the spin itself. He believed that if he could integrate his own wind nature directly into the technique's core, rather than applying it externally like Rasen Shuriken eventually did, he'd create something exponentially more powerful. And he was right. That part actually worked, eventually, though it took him the better part of a year of failed attempts to get even that far. So he made a wind Rasengan, Naruto says slowly. That's what's in the scroll. But there was more, right? Sage chakra. And Kurama's chakra. Yes. Jiraiya's expression darkens. That's where things stopped being an impressive technical achievement, and started becoming something genuinely dangerous. He pauses here, and Naruto can see him choosing his next words carefully, the way you'd handle something fragile, something that could still cut you even after all these years. Your father theorized that if the elemental layer worked, then adding sage chakra, natural energy drawn from the world itself, would create an even greater multiplier. Sage mode amplifies everything a shinobi does, you know this already from your own training. He wasn't wrong about that part either. His early combined tests, elemental plus sage, showed real promise. Devastating power, and, for a while, reasonably stable. But then he tried adding Kurama's chakra. Jiraiya nods slowly. That's where it all went wrong. The story Jiraiya tells next unfolds like something out of a nightmare, and as the narrator here, let me just say, If you've ever wondered what it actually looks like when even a genius bites off more than he can chew, you're about to find out. It happened, Jiraiya explains, roughly a year before Kushina's due date, in a remote training ground far outside the village walls, the same kind of secluded clearing Naruto himself has been using, in a strange, unintentional echo of history. Minato had been working in secret for months by that point, telling almost no one, not even Kushina, the full extent of what he was attempting. He'd stabilized the elemental and sage combination reasonably well by then, not perfectly, but well enough that he considered it a genuine technical success, something he intended to refine further, and eventually document properly. The tailed beast chakra was supposed to be the final piece. The capstone. As the village's Jinchuriki host at the time, before that burden passed, tragically, to Kushina and then eventually to Naruto himself in the way we all know, Minato had access to controlled amounts of tailed beast chakra through specific sealing techniques developed by the Uzumaki clan. Techniques designed to draw out small, carefully measured amounts without triggering a full transformation or losing control. It was dangerous even under normal circumstances. Weaving that chakra directly into an already unstable, already experimental technique multiplied that danger considerably. He believed, Jiraiya says, that if the wind and sage layers had gone well, adding a controlled thread of tailed beast chakra would complete the technique, give it a final, almost unstoppable edge. What he didn't fully account for was how those three chakra types would behave once forced to occupy the same spinning structure at the same time. What happened? Naruto asks, voice quieter now. They fought each other, Jiraiya says simply. Elemental chakra behaves one way. Sage chakra behaves another, drawing from an external, natural source rather than the user's own reserves. And tailed beast chakra is its own animal entirely, quite literally, aggressive, overwhelming, resistant to being shaped by anything that isn't its original owner's will. Your father was essentially asking three separate forces, each with their own nature and resistance, to occupy a single compressed spiral at once. For a fraction of a second it worked. And then it didn't. Jiraiya's voice grows quieter here, and Naruto realizes, with a small jolt, that he is watching someone relive a memory that clearly still costs him something to revisit. The technique ruptured almost instantly once it destabilized. Your father's entire right arm took the worst of the backlash. Chakra pathways torn open from wrist to shoulder, nerve damage severe enough that for almost 2 weeks, we genuinely weren't sure if he'd regain full use of that arm again. He was in agony. Worse than agony, honestly. The kind of pain that comes from your own chakra network attacking itself from the inside. I found him barely conscious in that clearing, half his arm blackened from the strain, and I genuinely thought, for about 30 seconds, that I was going to lose my student. Naruto's grip tightens around his teacup. He recovered, Jiraiya continues, eventually. Slowly. Medical Nin worked on that arm for weeks. But something changed in him after that. Not his ambition, exactly. Your father never really lost his ambition for anything. But his relationship to that particular technique changed completely. He sealed the research away. Told me, and only me, that he intended to return to it eventually, once he'd found a way to make the three chakra types cooperate rather than compete. But then the war came. Then you were born. Then, Jiraiya doesn't finish that sentence. He doesn't need to. Naruto already knows how the story ends, knows it better than almost anyone in the village, carries the consequences of it sealed inside his own body every single day of his life. He never got the chance to go back to it. Naruto finishes quietly. Jiraiya nods. For a long moment, neither of them says anything. The tea in Naruto's cup has long gone cold, forgotten entirely somewhere around the part of the story where his father's arm turned black from chakra backlash. Outside, the village has fully woken up now, the distant sounds of merchants opening shops, kids running through the streets, the ordinary rhythm of a Thursday morning in Konoha, entirely unaware of the conversation happening in this small apartment. So that's it, Jiraiya says finally, leaning back. That's the whole story. 3 separate chakra sources, each with a mind and nature of its own, refusing to share a single spinning technique without tearing their user apart in the process. Your father was strong enough to survive that failure. I'm not entirely convinced everyone would be. Naruto is quiet for a long moment, processing everything, turning the story over in his mind. Sakura would probably tell him to take a step back here. Kakashi would probably tell him the same. Even Jiraiya, sitting right in front of him, has essentially just spent the last 20 minutes explaining, in vivid and painful detail, exactly why this is a terrible idea. But here's the thing about Naruto Uzumaki, something you've probably already figured out if you've watched even one episode of his story before. The boy has never once in his life heard the phrase "this is too dangerous," even for a genius, and interpreted it as anything other than a challenge. Kurama, Naruto says slowly. Jiraiya raises an eyebrow. What about him? Dad had to steal small amounts of tailed beast chakra through sealing techniques, Naruto says, sitting up straighter now, something clicking into place behind his eyes. He had to force it into the technique from the outside, without any actual cooperation from Kurama, right? Because back then, Kurama was still sealed inside Kushina, and there wasn't exactly a partnership there. That's correct, Jiraiya says slowly, watching Naruto's expression shift in real time, watching the exact moment the boy's mind starts working through a problem that clearly hasn't occurred to him, or to anyone, until right now. But Kurama isn't like that with me, Naruto says, voice picking up speed now, excitement creeping back, and despite everything he just heard. He's not some hostile force I have to steal chakra from. We're partners. He wants to help me. What if that's the missing piece? What if the reason it tore Dad apart is because he was fighting against tailed beast chakra that didn't want to cooperate? And I wouldn't have that problem, because Kurama and I already trust each other. Jiraiya opens his mouth to argue, and then closes it again, because, infuriatingly, the boy might actually have a point. A real one. Not the reckless, blind optimism kind of point Naruto usually makes when he's trying to convince someone to let him do something dangerous, but an actual, structurally sound piece of insight that Minato, sealed away from his own Jinchuriki and working essentially alone, never had access to. That doesn't mean the elemental and sage chakra will suddenly play nice just because Kurama's on board, Jiraiya says carefully, trying, and failing, somewhat, to hold the line here. No, Naruto agrees. But it means 1/3 of the problem might already be solved before I even start. That's gotta count for something, right, Naruto? Jiraiya's voice hardens now, some of the old authority creeping back into it. Your father lost partial use of his arm for 2 weeks. He was one of the most talented shinobi in history, and it still nearly crippled him. You are talented, I'm not denying that, but you are not there yet. Not close. And even if Kurama solves one part of this equation, you'd still be asking your body to withstand elemental and sage chakra fighting for dominance inside a single technique, which is exactly the part that gave your father the most trouble in the first place, tailed beast chakra aside. So I'll go slow, Naruto says. I'll test it carefully. I won't just throw myself at the whole thing at once like your father did, Jiraiya says pointedly. Which is exactly how he ended up in that clearing with his arm halfway destroyed. That lands? Naruto goes quiet again, some of the fire in his expression dimming, just slightly, under the weight of that particular comparison. I'm not trying to tell you not to grow, Jiraiya says, more gently now, seeing the effect his words have had. You know that's never been my style with you. But this isn't the same as learning a new jutsu, or pushing past the training plateau. This is a technique that hospitalized the strongest shinobi this village has ever produced. I'm asking you, as someone who loved your father, and who has watched you grow into someone I'm equally proud of, to think very carefully about whether finishing this jutsu is actually worth the risk. Because it isn't just your life you'd be gambling with. It's every mission you'll ever go on afterward. It's every person counting on you being alive and functional to protect this village. Naruto is silent for a long moment. Outside, a bird lands briefly on the windowsill before flitting away again, and somewhere down the street, a merchant calls out to a customer, the ordinary sounds of the village continuing on, indifferent to the weight of the conversation happening in this small kitchen. I hear you, Rasengan, Naruto finally says. I do. I'm not gonna pretend what happened to him doesn't scare me a little. But, he looks down at his own hands, flexing his fingers slowly, thinking about Kurama, about Sage Mode, about a father he never got to properly know, who wrote a message specifically for him and sealed it away for over a decade in the hope that someday, his son might find it. He said he hoped I'd have the wisdom he didn't, Naruto says quietly. But I don't think wisdom means giving up on something just because it's dangerous. I think it means being smarter about how you approach it than he was. Testing carefully. Listening to the people around me. Not doing it completely alone, the way he did. Jiraiya studies him for a long moment, and there is something in that gaze that carries an old, complicated kind of pride, the specific ache of watching someone become exactly as stubborn as the person they lost, and knowing there is genuinely nothing to be done about it now except try to keep them as safe as possible along the way. You're going to do this no matter what I say, aren't you? Jiraiya says finally. Naruto meets his eyes, steady now, the earlier hesitation gone. Yeah. I think I am. Jiraiya sighs, a long, heavy, defeated sound, and rubs at the bridge of his nose. Then you're not doing it completely alone. If you're going down this road regardless of what I say, I want eyes on you while you do it. Slow. Controlled. The absolute opposite of how your father approached it. Understood? Something in Naruto's chest loosens at that. Relief, gratitude, maybe both at once. Understood. Thank you, Rasengan. Don't thank me yet, Jiraiya mutters, standing and grabbing the untouched bag of onigiri off the table. Thank me if this doesn't put you in a hospital bed. Later that day, walking back toward his own quarters, Jiraiya finds himself replaying the conversation over and over, turning Naruto's earlier observation about Kurama around in his mind. It's not a foolish point. It's actually, if he's being completely honest with himself, a genuinely insightful one, the kind of lateral thinking that Minato himself, brilliant as he was, simply didn't have access to under his own circumstances, which raises a question Jiraiya doesn't particularly enjoy sitting with. What if Naruto succeeds where his father failed, not despite being less naturally gifted than Minato, but specifically because of the one advantage his father never had, a willing, cooperative bond with the very tailed beast that made the technique so lethal in the first place? It's a possibility that should be reassuring. And in some ways it is, but Jiraiya has lived long enough, and lost enough people he cared about, to know that even the most promising advantages don't always account for everything. Elemental chakra and sage chakra still fought for dominance inside Minato's technique, with or without Kurama involved. That problem hasn't gone anywhere. And there's another variable neither Naruto nor Jiraiya has fully considered yet, one sitting quietly, right now, deep inside Naruto's own chakra network, having felt every single flicker of interest and intention drifting through the boy's mind over the last several days. Kurama has been listening. And Kurama, unlike Jiraiya, already knows something crucial about this technique that neither Minato's old research nor Jiraiya's second-hand account fully captured. He knows exactly what tailed beast chakra feels like from the inside of that failed experiment, because a fragment of his own chakra was the one tearing through Minato's arm that day, fighting against a foreign will that hadn't earned his trust. And he has some very strong opinions about whether history is about to repeat itself. That night, back in his own apartment, notebook spread open once again across his kitchen table, Naruto sits quietly, chakra settled, eyes closed, doing something he doesn't do nearly often enough outside of training, actually sitting down to have a real conversation with the enormous presence that shares his body. Hey Kurama, he says quietly, into the stillness of his own mindscape. You awake? There's a long pause. And then, low and rumbling, unmistakably amused in that particular way the fox gets when he already knows exactly what's coming before Naruto even says it out loud. I've been awake this whole time, Kit. And I already know exactly what you're about to ask me. Naruto's eyes snap open in the waking world, heart suddenly beating a little faster. Because if Kurama already knows what he's about to ask, that means Kurama already knows about the scroll, about Minato, about the exact technique that once tore through his own arm like fire through dry paper. And judging by the weight in that voice, the fox has a great deal more to say about all of it than either Jiraiya or Naruto's own research could have possibly prepared him for. What exactly does Kurama remember about that failed technique? And more importantly, is he willing to help Naruto succeed where Minato couldn't, or is he about to shut this entire idea down before it even really begins? I already know exactly what you're about to ask me. The words echo through Naruto's mindscape with a weight that makes him sit up a little straighter on his apartment floor, notebook forgotten beside him, every muscle in his body suddenly alert. Then you know about the scroll, Naruto says slowly. About the technique. About what happened to my dad. I know more about what happened to your father than you or that old toad sage ever will, Kurama rumbles, and there's something in his voice that isn't quite anger, but isn't far from it either, because I was there, Kit. Not in the way you're thinking, not physically standing in that clearing. But the chakra that tore through his arm that day? A fragment of it came from me, sealed inside your mother at the time, forced out through those cursed Uzumaki extraction seals your father used, without so much as a conversation first. Naruto swallows. So it really is true. You almost killed him. I didn't do anything, Kurama snaps, and for a moment there's real irritation in the words, old and still raw despite the years. Your father ripped a piece of my chakra out of your mother's seal like tearing a page out of a book, and then tried to force that chakra to cooperate with two other energy sources it had never met, inside a technique it had no say in being part of. Of course it fought back. Any tailed beast chakra would fight back under those conditions. It wasn't cooperation. It was theft, dressed up as science. The words hit harder than Naruto expects, and for a moment he just sits there, absorbing them, turning them over. That's different from us though, Naruto says slowly. Right. You and me, we're not like that anymore. There's a long pause, and when Kurama speaks again, some of the earlier heat has cooled into something more thoughtful, more measured. No, the fox admits. We are not like that. You've never once tried to force anything out of me, Kit. Every ounce of chakra I've ever lent you, I've given willingly. That is not a small difference. It is, in fact, the single largest variable your father never had access to. Naruto's heart picks up. So it could work. If you're actually helping instead of being forced. I did not say that, Kurama cuts in sharply. Do not put words into my mouth, Kit. I said the dynamic between us is different. I did not say the technique itself becomes safe simply because I'm willing. There were still two other forces tearing at each other inside that spiral that day, elemental chakra and sage chakra, either of which cared whether my portion was willing or unwilling. Removing one obstacle does not remove the other two, but it's a start, Naruto presses. It's one less thing to worry about, right? Kurama is silent for a long moment, and Naruto can practically feel the enormous weight of the fox's consideration pressing against the edges of his own mind, old, ancient, careful in a way that Naruto doesn't often get to witness from a being so used to brute force and raw temper. It is a start, Kurama finally concedes. But I want to be very clear about something before you go any further down this road, Kit. I am not going to stop you. I've watched you do enough impossible things by now that I've stopped pretending I have any real say in what you decide to attempt. But I am also not going to pretend this is safe just because it makes you happy to hear it. Your father was strong. Stronger than you are right now today. And it still broke him. I know, Naruto says quietly. Do you? Kurama's voice carries something almost gentle now, buried beneath the gravel of his usual tone. Because I've lived inside enough hosts across enough centuries to recognize the particular flavor of stubbornness radiating off you right now, Kit. And it looks exactly like the kind that gets people hurt before it ever gets them anywhere useful. Naruto doesn't have a good response to that. Because the truth is, Kurama isn't wrong. He knows he isn't wrong. But knowing a thing and letting it change your mind have never quite been the same currency where Naruto Uzumaki is concerned, and both of them know it. Fine, Kurama says finally, into the silence. If you're going to do this regardless of what either of us says, and let's not pretend that isn't exactly what's about to happen, then I would rather be standing beside you while you attempt it than sitting here uselessly waiting to feel my own chakra tear through your arm the same way it tore through his. Something in Naruto's chest loosens, gratitude flooding through him. Thanks, Kurama. Don't thank me, the fox growls. Start slow. Smaller than you want to. And the moment something feels wrong, actually wrong, not just difficult, you stop immediately. Do you understand me? Yeah, Naruto says. I understand. We'll see, Kurama mutters, not entirely convinced, and with that the presence in Naruto's mind settles back into watchful quiet, leaving Naruto alone with his notebook, his resolve, and the first real plan he's had since finding that scroll 3 days ago. The following morning, Naruto wakes before dawn, a genuinely rare occurrence, one that would probably alarm anyone who knows him well enough to expect him sleeping through his alarm and sprinting to training half-dressed. But today is different. Today, he has a plan, and for once in his life, Naruto actually intends to be careful about it. He makes his way to the same remote clearing he'd scouted a few days earlier, notebook tucked under one arm, the morning air still cool and damp with dew. It's early enough that the village is barely stirring, early enough that even the most dedicated training ground regulars haven't arrived yet. Perfect, in other words, for exactly the kind of secret experimentation Naruto has in mind. He starts, as any careful shinobi would, by summoning a handful of shadow clones, not to attempt the technique themselves, but to help him observe. One clone stands at the tree line, watching for anyone approaching. Two more position themselves at a safe distance, ready to intervene if something goes wrong. It's more caution than Naruto typically bothers with, and if Kakashi could see him right now, methodically setting up safety measures before even attempting a jutsu, he might actually be impressed. He wouldn't stay impressed for long. Because good intentions, as we're about to see, don't always translate into good execution, especially when the technique in question nearly cost the Fourth Hokage his arm. Naruto starts small, exactly as Kurama instructed. He forms a standard Rasengan first, something he can do in his sleep at this point, chakra spinning into a familiar, stable sphere in his palm without so much as a flicker of instability. Easy. Comfortable. The baseline he's built his entire arsenal around for years. Alright, he mutters to himself, studying the swirling blue chakra. Now for the hard part. According to Minato's notes, reconstructed carefully over the last several nights, the first layer of the forbidden technique involves introducing wind-natured chakra directly into the spinning core, rather than shaping it externally the way the Rasen Shuriken does. It's a subtle distinction, but according to the scroll, an essential one. The wind nature needs to exist inside the compression itself, spinning in tandem with the raw chakra rather than layered on top of it afterward. Naruto closes his eyes, focusing, drawing on his own wind affinity, something he's cultivated over years of training, ever since his Rasen Shuriken days, and begins carefully feeding a thread of that nature transformation directly into the swirling sphere in his palm. For about half a second, it actually works. The Rasengan surface ripples, subtle blade-like distortions beginning to form along its edge, the chakra sphere taking on a slightly sharper, more dangerous quality than its usual smooth spin. Naruto's breath catches, genuine excitement blooming in his chest, the first real proof that this might actually be possible. And then the sphere lurches violently sideways in his palm, spinning wildly off-axis, and detonates. The explosion isn't massive, nowhere near the scale of what happened to Minato, thankfully. But it's more than enough to send Naruto flying backward, his hand and forearm scorched from the backlash, chakra burns spreading angrily up toward his elbow. He hits the ground hard, rolling once before coming to a stop against the base of a tree, and for a moment he just lies there, staring up at the brightening sky, ears ringing. I told you to start slower than that, Kurama's voice rumbles inside his head, equal parts irritated and concerned. That was not slow, Kit. That was reckless the exact same way. I know, Naruto groans, pushing himself upright, cradling his injured hand against his chest. I know, alright? Ow. His clones rush over, one checking the tree line to make sure the noise didn't attract attention, the other kneeling beside him, inspecting the damage with the same worried expression Naruto himself would be wearing if their positions were reversed. That could have been worse, the clone offers, unhelpfully. Thanks, Naruto mutters, flexing his fingers experimentally and wincing at the sharp sting that shoots up his arm in response. Really comforting. He spends the next several minutes catching his breath, letting Kurama's chakra work through his system to speed the healing along, nowhere near instantaneous, not for chakra burns this deep, but enough to take the worst edge off the pain within a few minutes. Well? Kurama asks, once the immediate crisis has passed. Are you going to actually listen to me this time? Or do we need to repeat this lesson a few more times before it sticks? I heard you, Naruto says, examining his reddened palm. Smaller. Slower. Got it. Do you though? Naruto doesn't answer that one directly. Instead, he takes a breath, resets his stance, and, against every ounce of good sense Kurama has just tried to instill in him, forms another Rasengan. This time, he tells himself, he'll go slower. The next 4 attempts go, roughly speaking, exactly the same way. Each time, Naruto manages to hold the wind-layered instability for a fraction of a second longer than the last. Half a second, then nearly a full second, tiny, incremental progress that would be genuinely encouraging under any other circumstances. But each time, the technique eventually destabilizes and detonates in his palm, leaving fresh burns layered over the ones from his previous attempts, his chakra reserves steadily draining with each failed cycle. By the fifth attempt, his hand is a mess, red, blistered in places, throbbing with a dull ache that even Kurama's healing chakra is starting to struggle to keep pace with. His clones have long since stopped offering encouragement and started, instead, quietly exchanging worried glances behind his back. Enough, Kurama finally growls, after the fifth explosion sends Naruto stumbling backward again, this time hard enough to knock the wind out of him. That's enough for today, Kit. Your hand needs actual medical attention, not just my chakra papering over the damage. One more, Naruto pants, pushing himself back to his feet despite his clone's hand on his shoulder trying, gently, to hold him down. I felt it start to stabilize that time. I just need. You need to stop before you do something you can't heal from, Kurama snaps, sharper now, real urgency bleeding into the words. I have watched you push yourself past reasonable limits more times than I can count, Kit, and normally I let you, because normally the worst that happens is exhaustion. This is different. Your chakra pathways in that hand are already strained from the repeated backlash. One more failure at the wrong moment, and you're not looking at burns anymore. You're looking at exactly what happened to your father. That lands? Naruto goes still, staring down at his ruined hand, breathing hard, and for the first time since starting this morning, real fear flickers behind his eyes, not fear of failing, but fear of the specific, vivid image Kurama just planted in his mind. Pathways ruptured. Nerve damage. An arm that might never fully recover. Okay, Naruto says quietly, lowering his hand. Okay. One more day. But I'm coming back to this. I never said you wouldn't, Kurama mutters. I said stop for today. There's a difference, Kit, though I'm starting to wonder if you're capable of hearing it. Naruto manages a weak, exhausted laugh, wincing as the motion jostles his injured hand. Yeah? I hear you. He dismisses his clones, gathers his notebook, and makes his way slowly back toward the village, cradling his hand against his chest, already running through the wind-layering sequence in his mind, trying to pinpoint the exact moment each attempt destabilized, searching for the pattern he knows must be hiding somewhere in the failure. He is so absorbed in the analysis, in fact, that he completely fails to notice the very obvious problem waiting for him back in the village. A burned, blistered hand is not exactly the kind of thing you can hide from people who see you every single day. What, Sakura says very slowly, very deliberately, the moment Naruto walks into the training ground later that afternoon, happened to your hand? Naruto, to his credit, has at least attempted to bandage it before showing up, wrapping the worst of the damage in a hasty layer of gauze he found in his apartment's first aid kit, hoping it might pass for something minor if he keeps his hand tucked casually at his side. It does not pass for something minor. Sakura's eyes lock onto the bandaging the instant he steps into view, and her expression shifts almost immediately from casual greeting to focused, clinical concern. The exact look she gets right before she starts asking the kind of questions Naruto really doesn't want to answer. Oh, this? Naruto says, forcing a laugh, tucking the hand further behind his back like that'll somehow make it less obvious. It's nothing, Sakura-chan. Just a training accident. Tripped into a rock, that's all. You tripped into a rock, Sakura repeats flatly, and it burned your hand. Sharp rock? Sakura's eyes narrow, and before Naruto can react, she's crossed the distance between them and grabbed his wrist, turning his hand over with the brisk, practiced efficiency of someone who has spent years working in the hospital and has absolutely no patience left for obvious lies. She unwraps the bandage with quick, careful fingers, and the moment the damage is exposed, angry red burns layered over each other, blistering in several places, clearly chakra-related rather than the result of any rock, sharp or otherwise. Her expression hardens into something Naruto has learned, through long and often painful experience, to be genuinely afraid of. This is chakra burn, Sakura says, voice tight. Repeated chakra burn, layered over multiple instances, which means you didn't just injure yourself once and walk it off, you kept going after the first one happened. Possibly several times. She looks up at him, green eyes sharp with a mixture of concern and rapidly building frustration. Naruto. What were you doing? Training, Naruto says, which isn't technically a lie, even if it's very far from the whole truth. Training on what? Sakura presses. Because this isn't standard Rasengan practice, and it isn't sage mode overexertion either. I've treated you for both of those enough times to recognize the pattern, and this doesn't match. This looks like something destabilized in your hand repeatedly. Multiple times. What jutsu were you working on? Naruto hesitates, and that hesitation, brief as it is, tells Sakura everything she needs to know. Whatever this is, it isn't something he's willing to explain, at least not right now, and given how well she knows him, that alone is enough to genuinely worry her. It's nothing dangerous, Naruto says, which is, generously, a significant stretch of the truth. I promise, Sakura-chan. I'm being careful. You have chakra burns stacked on top of chakra burns, Sakura says, voice rising slightly. That is the literal opposite of being careful, Naruto. Before the conversation can escalate further, Kakashi arrives. Late as always, though today his timing feels almost suspiciously convenient, and the moment his single visible eye lands on Naruto's injured hand, something in his posture shifts subtly, an alertness that wasn't there a moment ago. That's a fair amount of chakra burn for a Thursday afternoon, Kakashi observes mildly, though there's something considerably sharper hiding beneath the casual tone. Sakura's right to ask, what exactly have you been working on? Naruto glances between the two of them, Sakura's arms crossed, clearly not about to let this go, and Kakashi's expression unreadable behind his mask, though the intensity of his gaze suggests he's already piecing together more than he's letting on. It's a personal project, Naruto finally says, choosing his words carefully. Something I'm working through on my own. I'm not trying to keep secrets from either of you, I promise. I just need a little more time before I can really explain it properly. Sakura looks like she wants to argue further, but something in Naruto's expression, earnest, a little tired, clearly not lying so much as genuinely not ready to share yet, makes her hold back, at least for the moment. She lets his hand go, though not without one final, pointed look. I'm treating this properly before you go anywhere, she says firmly, already reaching for the medical supplies she keeps on hand during training. And Naruto, whatever this project is, if it's causing burns like this, I want you to promise me you'll actually tell me before it gets any worse. Not after. I promise, Naruto says, and means it, even as some small, honest part of him already suspects it's a promise he might struggle to keep. Kakashi doesn't push further in the moment, but as Sakura works on properly treating Naruto's hand, his sensei's gaze lingers a beat too long, thoughtful and quietly calculating in a way that makes Naruto distinctly uneasy. Kakashi has known Naruto a long time. Long enough to recognize, better than almost anyone, the particular expression of a student sitting on something significant. He doesn't say anything else about it today. But he doesn't forget it either. That evening, hand freshly bandaged and aching under Sakura's surprisingly thorough field treatment, Naruto sits alone in his apartment once again, notebook open on the table in front of him, staring at the reconstructed diagrams of his father's failed technique. 5 attempts today. 5 failures. A burned hand, a suspicious teammate, and a sensei who clearly suspects something significant is going on, even if he hasn't pushed for details yet. By any reasonable measure, today should feel like a defeat. And yet, turning the notebook pages slowly, tracing back through each attempt in his memory, Naruto can't shake a small, stubborn flicker of something that feels almost like hope. Because each failure, however painful, taught him something concrete. The wind layer destabilizes at almost exactly the same point every time, roughly 3/4 of a second into the spin, right as the elemental nature tries to fully integrate with the compressed chakra rather than simply riding alongside it. That's not random. That's a pattern. And patterns, unlike raw failure, can be studied, refined, eventually solved. He glances down at the bandaging on his hand, flexing his fingers slowly, wincing at the dull ache that answers the movement. You're thinking about tomorrow already, aren't you? Kurama says quietly, more resigned than accusatory at this point. Maybe, Naruto admits. Your hand needs actual rest, Kit. Not one night. Several days, at minimum, if you want those pathways to heal properly instead of scarring over week. I know, Naruto says. I'll be smarter about it tomorrow. Smaller adjustments. I think I know where it's going wrong. Kurama is quiet for a long moment, and when he speaks again, there's something almost like grudging respect buried beneath the exasperation. You really are his son, you know, reckless as hell, and somehow still finding the one useful thread buried inside all that recklessness. Naruto huffs out a tired laugh, closing the notebook gently. I'll take that as a compliment. Take it however you want, Kurama grumbles. Just don't take my patience for granted while you're at it. Rest tonight. Actually rest, Kit. Tomorrow, we go slower. Properly slower this time. Properly slower, Naruto echoes, and for once, he actually means to keep that promise. He turns off the lamp, climbs into bed, hand throbbing quietly beneath fresh bandages, mind still turning over wind chakra ratios and compression timing long after his eyes finally slide shut. He doesn't know it yet, but tomorrow's careful, controlled progress is about to draw exactly the kind of attention he's been trying so hard to avoid, because word of strange explosions echoing from the outskirts of the village doesn't stay contained to one curious teammate and one suspicious sensei for very long. And when the person who eventually comes looking for answers happens to be someone with the sharpest analytical eyes in the entire village, Naruto might find it a whole lot harder to keep this project quiet than he's currently hoping. What happens when Naruto returns to training the very next day? And who's about to notice those strange chakra signatures drifting from the outskirts of Konoha? Sakura's field treatment holds up reasonably well overnight, but by morning, Naruto's hand is still tender enough that even flexing his fingers sends a dull ache shooting up toward his elbow. He sits at his kitchen table, notebook open, staring at his own reconstructed diagrams with a frustration that has nothing to do with pain and everything to do with the fact that 5 failed attempts have taught him a pattern without teaching him a solution. You're doing that thing again, Kurama observes, his voice low and steady inside Naruto's mind. Staring at the page like it's going to rearrange itself into an answer if you glare hard enough. Got a better idea? Naruto mutters, not looking up. As a matter of fact, I do. There's something different in Kurama's tone this morning. Less exasperation, more genuine focus. Like the fox has spent the night turning something over in his own considerable, ancient mind. Close your eyes, Kit. I want to show you something rather than tell you. Naruto blinks, surprised, but does as he's told, setting the notebook aside and settling into a familiar meditative posture, breathing slow and even until the edges of his apartment fade and he finds himself standing, once again, in the vast, dim space of his own mindscape, water pooling gently around his ankles, towering bars long since bent and broken standing quiet in the distance, and Kurama himself, massive and orange-red, settled comfortably behind them, watching him with sharp, contemplative eyes. All right, Naruto says. Show me what? Sit, Kurama says, and Naruto does, cross-legged in the shallow water, waiting. You've been thinking about this technique as 3 ingredients that need to be mixed together, Kurama begins, his voice resonating through the mindscape with an odd, textured weight, like something ancient settling into a lecture it has clearly given, in one form or another, many times over many centuries. Elemental chakra. Sage chakra. Tailed beast chakra. Combine them, spin them together, and out comes your technique. That is the wrong way to think about it, and it is exactly the mistake that put your father in a hospital bed. Okay, Naruto says slowly. So how should I think about it? Picture 3 separate rivers, Kurama says, and as he speaks, the water around Naruto's ankles begins, subtly, to shift and ripple, 3 distinct currents forming and swirling around him. Visible manifestations of the fox's own chakra given shape for the sake of the lesson. Each one flows a certain way. Each one has its own current, its own pressure, its own direction. Elemental chakra flows according to the nature it's shaped into, sharp, cutting, aggressive in your case, given your wind affinity. Sage chakra flows differently entirely, because it isn't originating from you at all. It's drawn from the natural world itself, filtered through your body rather than generated by it, which means it behaves according to rules your own chakra network didn't create and doesn't fully control. The 3 currents around Naruto's ankles swirl faster now, illustrating the point. One sharp and jagged, one slow and heavy, pressing outward like a tide. And tailed beast chakra, Kurama continues, and the 3rd current takes shape, dense and volatile, pulsing with a kind of restless, barely contained energy that Naruto recognizes instantly, having felt echoes of it countless times throughout his life, flows according to the will of whichever beast it belongs to. It does not care about elemental nature. It does not care about the natural world's rules. It responds to intention, to bond, to trust, or the absence of those things. So 3 totally different systems, Naruto says slowly, watching the currents swirl around him. Trying to occupy the same space at once. Now you're catching up, Kurama says. Your father's mistake wasn't a lack of skill, Kit. It was believing that if he simply forced these 3 rivers into the same narrow channel, one small, compressed Rasengan core, they would naturally merge into something greater. The same way water from 3 separate streams eventually joins into one larger river downstream, given enough time and space. But a Rasengan isn't a big open space, Naruto says. It's tiny. Compressed on purpose. Precisely, Kurama says, and something in his voice carries the weight of genuine respect for the observation. 3 rivers, forced through a channel barely wide enough for one. They do not merge gently under that kind of pressure. They collide. Violently. Each current fighting for dominance rather than blending, because there is no room, no time, for them to naturally reconcile their different natures. That collision is what tore through your father's arm, not a failure of strength. A failure of approach. Naruto sits with that for a long moment, watching the 3 currents swirl faster and faster around him, the tension between them growing visibly more chaotic the longer they're forced to occupy the same small space. So how do you actually make 3 rivers work together without a collision? Naruto asks finally. Is that even possible? That, Kurama says, is the question your father never got the chance to answer. He spent his final months of research on this technique trying to force greater compatibility through sheer chakra control, refining his shape manipulation further, tightening the spiral, believing that a more perfectly formed vessel would simply contain the collision better. He was, in a sense, trying to build a stronger dam rather than solving the actual problem of 3 incompatible currents. Did it work? It delayed the rupture, Kurama says. Marginally. But a stronger dam does not resolve incompatible currents, Kit. It only holds the collision back slightly longer before the inevitable break. Which is, if you'll recall, exactly what happened to him, slightly later than his earliest attempts, but no less violently. Naruto's stomach tightens at that, the reality of it settling in more fully now than it had through Jiraiya's second-hand account. Watching the currents swirl and collide in front of him, feeling the manifested tension of it even here in his own mindscape, gives the danger a tangibility that words alone hadn't quite managed. So what's the actual answer? Naruto asks. If a stronger dam doesn't work, what does? Kurama is quiet for a long moment, the massive fox's expression thoughtful in a way Naruto doesn't often get to see. I don't know, Kit, Kurama admits finally, and there's something almost startling about the honesty in it. No pride, no bravado, just a genuine, considered admission from a being who has existed for centuries and rarely finds himself without an answer. I have theories, but I want to be honest with you about the limits of what I actually know here, rather than let you walk into this believing I have all the answers your father was missing. Okay, Naruto says. What are your theories? The dam approach fails because it treats the 3 currents as opponents to be contained, Kurama says slowly, working through the thought as he speaks it, the currents around Naruto's ankles shifting subtly with the rhythm of his consideration. What if, instead, they were treated as participants to be sequenced, not forced to occupy the same space simultaneously, fighting for the same narrow channel all at once, but introduced one after another, in careful order, each one given a moment to settle before the next joins? Naruto blinks. Like one at a time, instead of all at once? Not entirely separate, Kurama clarifies. The final technique would still need all 3 woven together eventually. But rather than throwing all 3 rivers into the channel simultaneously and hoping they merge, what if the elemental layer settled first, given a proper foundation to stabilize against? Then Sage Chakra layered in second, building on that foundation rather than competing with it from the very first instant. And only once those 2 have found some equilibrium, Tailed Beast Chakra introduced last, joining a structure that already has some stability rather than adding to pure chaos? Naruto sits with that, turning it over slowly. And for the first time since finding the scroll, something clicks into place that feels less like blind hope and more like an actual, structural insight. That's different from what my dad tried, Naruto says slowly. He was throwing all three in at once, right from the start. As far as I understand his notes through what you and the old Toad Sage have described to me, yes, Kurama confirms. Which may explain why the collision happened almost instantly for him rather than developing gradually. But I want to be very clear, Kit, this is a theory. I am not certain it will work. I am not even certain it's meaningfully safer than what your father attempted. It may simply delay the same collision by a different mechanism, the same way his stronger compression did. But it's worth testing, Naruto says. Carefully, Kurama says, with unmistakable emphasis. Which is precisely why I brought you here today rather than simply letting you throw yourself at another 5 reckless attempts in that clearing. If we are going to test a sequencing approach, we test it in the smallest possible increments, Kit. A sliver of elemental chakra first, held stable on its own before anything else joins, not the full wind layering you attempted yesterday. A fraction of it. Do you understand? Naruto nods slowly, the earlier eagerness tempered now by genuine understanding of the stakes. A fraction. Small. Got it. And we do not attempt tailed beast chakra at all, Kurama adds firmly, not for a long while yet. Not until the first 2 layers have found real, tested stability together. Is that understood as well? Understood, Naruto says. And this time, watching the swirling currents around his ankles settle slightly as the conversation winds down, he actually means it. Back in the waking world, hands still tender, Naruto spends the rest of the morning doing something almost unrecognizable for him. Sitting still, notebook open, methodically revising his approach based on everything Kurama just walked him through. Rather than the full wind layering technique he attempted yesterday, he sketches out a much smaller, more incremental version. Introduce the thinnest possible thread of wind nature into a stable Rasengan core, hold it there without adding anything further, and simply observe whether it can remain stable on its own before ever considering a second layer. It's slower. More tedious. Considerably less exciting than the version of this project that existed in his head a few days ago, when he imagined charging forward and mastering the whole technique through sheer force of will and repetition. But it's also, he has to admit, smarter. And after watching those 3 currents collide over and over in his mindscape, smarter feels like exactly what this project needs right now. By early afternoon, hand healed enough to attempt careful practice again, Naruto makes his way back to the same remote clearing, clones posted at the tree line as before, and begins again, this time, with genuine restraint. He forms the standard Rasengan first, familiar and stable in his palm. Then, rather than immediately layering in the full wind transformation as he did yesterday, he introduces the barest possible sliver of elemental nature, a fraction of what he attempted before, careful and controlled, watching closely for any sign of the destabilization that ended each of yesterday's attempts. The sphere holds. Not perfectly, there's a faint, subtle distortion along its surface, a slight sharpening at the edges that wasn't present in a standard Rasengan, but it holds. Spinning steadily in his palm for a full 3 seconds before he deliberately releases the chakra, letting it dissipate safely rather than pushing further. Naruto stares at his palm, breath caught in his chest. That worked, he says quietly, disbelief and excitement warring in his voice. Kurama, that actually worked. A small success, Kurama says, and there's real satisfaction in his voice, tempered with obvious caution. Do not mistake it for the whole technique, Kit. That was the smallest possible fraction of elemental integration, held for 3 seconds before you released it safely. We are a very long way from anything resembling your father's full technique. I know, Naruto says. But it's proof the sequencing idea actually works, right? At least for this first piece? It's promising, Kurama allows. Try it again. Same fraction, same duration. I want to see if that stability was genuine control or simple luck before we consider building on it. Naruto nods, resets his stance, and tries again. It holds a second time. And a third. By the 5th repetition, Naruto feels something shift in his chest, a confidence that's different from the reckless enthusiasm of yesterday's attempts, something quieter and more solid, built on actual, demonstrated success rather than pure hope. All right, Kurama says finally, after the 6th successful hold. That's enough repetitions of the same fraction for today. I don't want you pushing toward a larger integration yet, not until we've properly discussed the next step together. Small, controlled progress, Kit. That is the entire point of this approach. I hear you, Naruto says, and for once, he genuinely intends to listen, dismissing his clones, gathering his things, and making his way back toward the village with something that feels remarkably like real, sustainable hope rather than the desperate, reckless determination that drove yesterday's failures. He doesn't notice, walking back through the outskirts of the village, the handful of curious glances directed his way from a couple of Chunin stationed near the training grounds, glances that carry more than idle curiosity, given the string of strange explosions that have been reported drifting from that particular clearing over the past several days. Word, as it turns out, travels faster in a village full of shinobi trained specifically to notice unusual chakra signatures than Naruto has been accounting for. That evening, Kakashi finds himself standing in the Hokage's office, standing across from Tsunade's desk. A short written report in hand regarding unusual chakra disturbances reported near one of the village's more remote training grounds over the past several days. Multiple explosions, Tsunade reads aloud, scanning the report with a furrowed brow. Consistent chakra signature. Timing that lines up with early morning and early afternoon hours. Any idea what's causing this, Kakashi? I have a guess, Kakashi says carefully, though I'd like to look into it myself before bringing anything official into it. Tsunade's eyes narrow, sharp and knowing in the particular way that comes from decades of experience reading exactly this kind of careful evasion from the shinobi under her command. A guess that involves a specific student of yours, perhaps? One who showed up with fairly significant chakra burns yesterday, according to Sakura's medical log? Kakashi's visible eye creases slightly, not quite a smile, but something close to reluctant acknowledgement. You read Sakura's logs. I read everything that crosses my desk, Tsunade says flatly. Especially when it involves the Ninetales Jinchuriki showing up with unexplained chakra burns and refusing to explain what caused them. Talk to me, Kakashi. What is Naruto working on? Kakashi is quiet for a long moment, weighing exactly how much he actually knows against how much he's willing to speculate out loud, even to the Hokage herself. I don't have confirmation yet, he says finally. But given the location, the chakra signature described in these reports, and a conversation I had with Jiraiya-sama a few days back regarding some old research of the Fourth Hokages. He pauses, choosing his next words with obvious care. I think Naruto may have found something in the archives that he wasn't meant to find. Tsunade's expression shifts instantly, some of the earlier irritation giving way to genuine concern. What kind of research? I'd rather confirm it myself before speculating further, Kakashi says. But if my guess is correct, Hokage-sama, it's the kind of research that put Minato in a hospital bed for the better part of 2 weeks. I'd like your permission to look into this personally, rather than escalating it into a formal investigation just yet. Naruto responds better to direct conversation than to feeling cornered by official inquiry. Tsunade studies him for a long moment, weighing the request, before finally nodding, slow and deliberate. You have 3 days, Kakashi. If you haven't confirmed what's going on by then, or if these explosions escalate any further, I'm stepping in directly. Is that understood? Understood, Kakashi says, bowing slightly before turning to leave the office. Behind him, Tsunade remains seated at her desk for a long moment after the door closes, staring down at the report in her hands, an old, familiar unease settling in her chest. The particular dread of watching history circle back around on itself, of a father's mistakes finding their way, inevitably, into a son's ambitions. She has buried enough people she cared about to recognize the shape of this pattern forming. And she has absolutely no intention of losing another one to it, if she can possibly help it. Naruto, blissfully unaware of the conversation happening in the Hokage's office, spends that evening back in his apartment doing something he genuinely hasn't done much of over the past several days. Actually relaxing, notebook set aside for once, a simple bowl of ramen in front of him as he replays the day's small success over and over in his mind. 6 successful holds. Small, careful, incremental, but genuine, demonstrated proof that the sequencing approach Kurama proposed actually has real merit. It's not the full technique. It's not even close, but for the first time since finding that scroll in the vault, Naruto feels like he's actually building towards something sustainable. rather than just repeatedly throwing himself against an impossible wall and hoping sheer stubbornness eventually breaks through. You're feeling proud of yourself, Kurama observes, not unkindly, from somewhere deep in Naruto's mind. A little, Naruto admits, slurping down another mouthful of noodles. Is that bad? No, Kurama says. Small, earned progress is worth feeling good about, Kit. Just don't let that feeling convince you the hard part is behind you. We haven't even attempted layering sage chakra in yet, let alone anything involving my own chakra. What you accomplished today is the very first step of a very long staircase. I know, Naruto says. But it's a start, right? A real one this time. A real one, Kurama agrees, something almost warm threading through the words despite his usual gruffness. Rest well tonight, Kit. Tomorrow, we go slightly further, still carefully, still incrementally. And keep in mind, the old toad sage isn't the only one who's noticed strange chakra signatures drifting out from that training ground of yours. If I were you, I'd expect a visit sooner rather than later from someone considerably harder to talk your way past than Sakura's suspicious glances. Naruto pauses mid-bite, a flicker of unease cutting through the earlier satisfaction. You think Kakashi-sensei knows? I think, Kurama says, that a village full of trained shinobi tends to notice explosions echoing from the same clearing several days in a row. Whether Kakashi has pieced together the specifics yet, I couldn't say. But I would be very surprised if you have much more time left before someone comes looking for real answers. Naruto sets down his chopsticks, appetite suddenly a little diminished, staring at the cooling bowl of ramen in front of him. He isn't wrong to worry. Because far across the village, in a modest apartment not so different from his own, a certain silver-haired sensei is already sitting with a small stack of old research materials pulled discreetly from Jiraiya's personal notes, piecing together, with the same sharp analytical mind that made him one of the most respected shinobi of his generation, exactly what his late sensei's son has been secretly attempting. And somewhere beyond the village walls, on the final stretch of a long return journey, another familiar figure is making his way back toward Konoha after months away, someone whose own uniquely gifted eyes have a particular talent for noticing exactly the kind of subtle, unusual chakra patterns that Naruto has been trying so hard to keep hidden. Naruto's careful, controlled progress may be exactly what this technique needs, but keeping that progress a secret? That particular battle, it seems, is about to become considerably harder to win. What happens when the people closest to Naruto finally start asking the questions he's been avoiding? And just how much longer can this secret possibly hold, with both his sensei and an old rival closing in from two different directions? The gates of Konoha come into view just as the sun begins its slow descent toward the horizon, painting the village walls in warm shades of amber and gold. Sasuke Uchiha walks through them without ceremony, without fanfare, the way he always has, a lone figure in dark, practical traveling clothes, sword strapped across his back, expression as unreadable as ever after months away on an extended reconnaissance mission along the northern border. The gate guards nod their acknowledgement, logging his return without comment, and Sasuke makes his way through the familiar streets toward the Hokage's tower to deliver his mission report, his mind already running through the details he needs to cover: troop movements, border tensions, a handful of minor skirmishes that required his intervention. He doesn't expect anything unusual to catch his attention on the walk back. Konoha, after a long enough absence, tends to feel remarkably the same no matter how much time passes. The same market stalls, the same children running through the streets, the same quiet, steady rhythm of a village that has weathered far worse than a few months without one of its shinobi. But as he passes near the outer training grounds, something makes him pause. It's faint. So faint that anyone without his particular set of eyes might have missed it entirely. A lingering trace of chakra residue clinging to the air near one of the more remote clearings, unusual in its composition in a way that immediately draws Sasuke's attention. He's felt plenty of chakra signatures in his life, catalogued more variations of nature transformation and technique residue than most shinobi encounter in a lifetime. He has never felt anything quite like this. Sasuke stops walking, turning slightly toward the source, brow furrowing as his mind automatically begins parsing the signature. There's wind chakra present, unmistakably, layered with something else entirely, something that feels almost like sage chakra, though subtly different in its texture, as though it's being held in an unusually tight, controlled compression rather than the freer expression he'd expect from typical sage mode training. And beneath both of those, faint but undeniable, a third thread, something heavier, more ancient, carrying an unmistakable weight that Sasuke recognizes instantly from years of proximity to exactly one specific chakra source in this entire village. Kurama. Sasuke's eyes narrow. He knows immediately, without needing further confirmation, exactly whose training ground this residue belongs to. What he doesn't know is why Naruto would be combining these three specific chakra types together, a combination that, as far as Sasuke's considerable knowledge of technique theory extends, shouldn't logically coexist within a single, stable jutsu. He files the observation away, resolves to investigate further once his official duties are handled, and continues on toward the Hokage's tower, curiosity now thoroughly piqued. Naruto's mission report goes smoothly enough on Sasuke's end. Brief, efficient, exactly the kind of no-nonsense debrief you'd expect from someone who has never had much patience for unnecessary conversation. Tsunade listens, nods along, asks a handful of follow-up questions about border activity, and dismisses him with the usual instruction to rest before his next assignment. But as Sasuke turns to leave, something in Tsunade's expression gives him pause, a flicker of tension behind her otherwise composed exterior that doesn't quite match the routine nature of the debrief they just finished. "Sasuke," she says, before he can fully exit the office. "While you were away, did you happen to pass near the outer training grounds on your way in?" The question catches him slightly off guard, though he doesn't let it show. "I did." "Notice anything unusual?" Sasuke considers his answer carefully, weighing how much to reveal against how much he actually wants confirmed before speaking further. "Chakra residue. Unusual composition." "Why do you ask, Hokage-sama?" Tsunade studies him for a long moment, clearly debating how much to share, before apparently deciding that Sasuke's own sharp instincts are likely to uncover the situation regardless of whether she confirms it directly. "There have been reports of explosions coming from that same area over the past several days," she says. "Kakashi believes he knows the cause, but he's asked for a few days to investigate personally before escalating things further. I'd appreciate it if you kept your observations to yourself for now, at least until he's had the chance to confirm what's going on." Something clicks into place behind Sasuke's dark eyes. This involves Naruto. It isn't a question, and Tsunade doesn't bother pretending otherwise. "I'd rather not speculate further until Kakashi reports back. But given what you're describing, I suspect your instincts are correct." Sasuke is quiet for a moment, processing this, an old, familiar thread of curiosity beginning to stir beneath his usually composed exterior, the same curiosity that has driven him, throughout his entire life, toward understanding and mastering techniques other people consider beyond reach. "I'll keep it to myself," Sasuke says finally. For now. He leaves the Hokage's tower with far more on his mind than he'd anticipated walking in, and by the time he reaches the modest quarters he keeps in the village for his rare visits home, his curiosity has fully hardened into intent. He isn't going to wait for Kakashi's investigation to run its course. If Naruto is combining wind, sage, and tailed beast chakra into some kind of experimental technique, Sasuke wants to understand exactly what that technique is. And if he's being fully honest with himself, he wants to see it firsthand before anyone else gets the chance to fully piece it together. Some rivalries, it turns out, never quite fade. They just change shape. Naruto is in the middle of his fourth successful hold of the day, still working through the same small, controlled wind integration exercise Kurama outlined, patient and methodical in a way that would genuinely surprise anyone who's only ever seen his more reckless side, when a familiar voice cuts through the quiet of the clearing. "That's an unusual chakra signature." Naruto's concentration shatters instantly, the Rasengan in his palm dissipating in a harmless puff of chakra as he spins around, heart leaping at the sight of a figure leaning casually against a nearby tree, arms crossed, dark eyes sharp with unmistakable curiosity. "Sasuke!" Naruto's face breaks into a wide, genuine grin, all thoughts of secrecy momentarily forgotten in the surprise of seeing his old teammate back in the village. "When did you get back? Nobody told me you were." "I got back a few hours ago," Sasuke says, pushing off the tree and approaching at an unhurried pace, eyes never leaving Naruto's hand, still faintly glowing with residual chakra from the exercise. I was on my way to the tower when I felt something strange coming from this direction. Wind chakra. Sage chakra. And something else underneath both of those. He stops a short distance away, gaze finally lifting to meet Naruto's. Something that felt a lot like Kurama. Naruto's grin falters slightly, the familiar mix of guilt and reluctance settling in that he's grown used to over the past several days of dodging questions from Sakura and avoiding Kakashi's suspicious glances. It's a... Naruto rubs the back of his neck, buying himself a moment to think. It's kind of a long story. I have time, Sasuke says simply, and there's something in his tone that makes clear he isn't leaving without an actual explanation this time. Naruto studies his old rival for a long moment, the same sharp, analytical gaze he's always had, the same quiet patience that used to drive Naruto crazy back when they were kids, and Sasuke seemed to effortlessly grasp techniques that took Naruto weeks of struggle to even partially understand. But there's something else there too, something that feels less like scrutiny and more like genuine, invested curiosity, the kind Sasuke rarely extends toward anything these days. And honestly, after days of secrecy, of dodging Sakura's worried questions and feeling the weight of Kakashi's watchful gaze, there's something almost like relief in the idea of finally telling someone the full truth. All right, Naruto says finally, gesturing toward a fallen log at the edge of the clearing. Sit down. This is gonna take a while. Sasuke listens without interruption as Naruto walks through the entire story, the archive vault, the scroll, Minato's abandoned research, Jiraiya's account of the failed attempt that nearly cost his father an arm, and finally, Kurama's theory about sequencing the 3 chakra types rather than forcing them together all at once. By the time Naruto finishes, the sun has dipped noticeably lower in the sky, and Sasuke's expression has shifted from casual curiosity into something considerably more focused. The particular intensity he reserves for genuinely difficult technical problems. The same look he used to get during their early Team 7 days whenever a new technique presented a challenge worth actually engaging with. So your father attempted to force all 3 chakra types into a single compression simultaneously, Sasuke says slowly, working through the logic out loud. And the collision between incompatible currents is what caused the rupture. That's the theory, Naruto confirms. Kurama thinks sequencing them, introducing one at a time, letting each settle before the next joins, might avoid that collision, or at least delay it long enough to actually work with. Might, Sasuke repeats, arching an eyebrow. You're testing an unconfirmed theory about a technique that already put your father in the hospital. When you say it like that, it sounds worse than it is. It sounds exactly as dangerous as it actually is, Sasuke says flatly, though there's no real judgment in his tone. More just a precise, clinical assessment of the risk involved. How far have you gotten? Naruto holds up his hand, demonstrating the small, stable wind integration he's managed to achieve. This much. A tiny thread of elemental chakra held stable inside the core, for a few seconds at a time, without destabilizing. Sasuke studies the demonstration carefully, Sharingan flickering to life briefly as he observes the chakra flow with considerably more precision than the naked eye alone could manage. The compression is uneven, he says after a moment. Here. He gestures toward a specific point along the outer edge of where Naruto's Rasengan had been spinning moments before. Your wind nature integrates cleanly at the core, but the outer layer of the spiral isn't rotating at quite the same speed. That's likely where your instability originates when you push further. The mismatch between inner and outer rotation speed creates a shearing effect once you try to add more nature transformation. Naruto blinks, genuinely surprised. Wait, you can see that? Just from watching it for a few seconds? Sharingan, Sasuke says simply, as if that explains everything, which, to be fair, it mostly does. I can track chakra flow with considerably more precision than you can feel it from the inside. If you're going to keep attempting this, having a second set of eyes tracking the exact point of failure would probably save you a fair number of burned hands. There's a beat of silence as the offer settles between them, and Naruto's expression shifts slowly from surprise into something warmer, more grateful. You're offering to help? Naruto asks. Sasuke shrugs, the gesture carefully casual, though something in his eyes suggests genuine interest rather than mere obligation. It's an interesting technical problem, and, he adds after a brief pause, if you're going to be reckless about this regardless of what anyone says, which, knowing you, you absolutely are, I'd rather be here to catch the mistakes before they turn into something worse. Naruto grins, the expression wide and genuine. That almost sounded like you actually care, Sasuke. Don't get used to it, Sasuke says, though there's no real bite behind the words. Over the following 2 days, Sasuke's involvement transforms Naruto's approach to the technique in ways that even Kurama's theoretical guidance couldn't fully achieve on its own. When Naruto has been working largely by feel, sensing instability through the sensation of chakra fighting against itself in his palm, Sasuke's Sharingan allows him to observe the actual mechanics of the failure in real time, pinpointing exact moments and locations where the rotation speed mismatches, where compression unevenness begins to build toward collapse. Slower on the outer rotation, Sasuke says, watching closely as Naruto attempts another controlled integration. You're compressing the core correctly, but the outer layer is spinning faster than it needs to. Match the speeds more precisely. Naruto adjusts, brow furrowed in concentration, and the sphere in his palm holds, stable, controlled. The faint wind distortion along its surface even and consistent rather than jagged and uneven as it had been in his earlier, unsupervised attempts. Better, Sasuke says, and there's something almost like satisfaction in his tone. It isn't lost on either of them how familiar this dynamic feels, Sasuke observing, analyzing, offering precise technical correction, and Naruto absorbing it through sheer stubborn repetition until his body internalizes what his mind is being told. It's the same rhythm that defined so much of their early training together, back when they were kids competing for Kakashi's attention, though the tone between them now carries considerably less of the old antagonism, and considerably more of something that looks a lot like genuine partnership. You know, Naruto says, during a brief pause between attempts, wiping sweat from his brow, I always figured if anyone was gonna help me with something like this, it'd be Rasengan or Kakashi-sensei. Not you. Sasuke's eyes flick toward him, unreadable for a moment before something that might almost be amusement crosses his features. You assumed wrong, apparently. Why though? Naruto presses, genuinely curious now. Why help with something this dangerous, when you could have just as easily reported it to Kakashi-sensei and let him handle it? Sasuke is quiet for a moment, considering the question with the same careful precision he brings to everything else. Because you're doing this regardless of what anyone says, Sasuke says finally. That much is obvious. The only real choice is whether you do it recklessly, alone, the way you started, or carefully, with someone actually paying attention to the details you can't see from the inside. He pauses, and because this is a technically fascinating problem, I'm not going to pretend that isn't part of it. Naruto laughs, the sound genuine and warm. That's fair. Honestly, that's more than fair. They fall into a comfortable rhythm over the following sessions, Naruto attempting increasingly refined versions of the wind integration exercise, Sasuke observing and correcting with his Sharingan, both of them slowly, methodically building towards something that feels considerably more stable and controlled than anything Naruto managed on his own. By the end of the second day, Naruto can hold the wind-integrated Rasengan for a full 10 seconds without any sign of destabilization. More than triple his best result from before Sasuke's involvement. That's real progress, Naruto says, grinning at his own palm as the chakra dissipates safely. It's a start, Sasuke corrects, echoing, without realizing it, almost the exact same phrase Jiraiya used days earlier in Naruto's kitchen. You still haven't attempted the sage chakra layer. That's a different problem entirely, and I doubt it'll be nearly as forgiving as elemental integration alone. One step at a time, Naruto says. That's the whole plan, remember? Sasuke nods slowly, though something in his expression suggests he's already turning his analytical mind toward that next, more difficult step, curiosity and caution mingling in equal measure. Word of Sasuke's return, and his apparent involvement in Naruto's mysterious training project, reaches Kakashi by the third day, not through any direct report, but simply through the natural gossip networks that exist in any village full of shinobi who notice everything happening around them, whether they intend to or not. Sasuke's helping him, Kakashi says, more to himself than to anyone else, standing at his window looking out over the village rooftops toward the distant outer training grounds. It isn't a surprise, exactly. If anything, it clarifies things considerably. Sasuke's analytical precision paired with Naruto's raw determination is a combination Kakashi has seen produce remarkable results before, back during their early years as a genin team. It also means Kakashi's window for a quiet, low-key investigation is rapidly closing. Two people experimenting with a technique this dangerous is concerning enough. But if word spreads further, if Sakura's suspicions deepen, if the explosions continue drawing attention from other shinobi patrolling the outer training grounds, this entire situation could spiral into something considerably harder to manage quietly. He makes a decision, finally, standing at that window, watching the sun begin its slow descent toward evening. Tomorrow. He'll confront Naruto directly tomorrow, before Tsunade's 3-day deadline forces the situation into something more formal, more difficult for everyone involved to navigate with any real nuance. That evening, back in his apartment, Naruto sits at his kitchen table, notebook spread open, carefully documenting the day's progress alongside Sasuke's technical observations. Kurama has been unusually quiet throughout the day's training sessions, content to let Sasuke's analytical guidance take the lead for once, though Naruto can feel the fox's attention lingering, thoughtful and watchful, in the back of his mind. He's good, Kurama says finally, breaking the quiet as Naruto finishes his notes for the evening. Better than I expected, honestly. That Sharingan of his caught details in your chakra flow that even I hadn't fully articulated. Yeah, Naruto agrees, setting down his pen. It's kind of nice, having someone else in on this. Feels less like I'm just stumbling around in the dark by myself. Don't let that comfort make you careless, Kurama warns, though there's less bite in the words than usual. Sasuke's observations are valuable, but they don't change the fundamental danger of what you're attempting. The sage chakra layer will be considerably more difficult than what you've managed so far, and once we reach the point of introducing my own chakra into the mix, no amount of Sharingan precision will make that inherently safe. I know, Naruto says quietly. One step at a time, though. Right, one step at a time, Kurama agrees. Naruto leans back in his chair, glancing toward his bandaged hand, mostly healed now, the burns from his earlier reckless attempts fading steadily under a combination of Sakura's treatment and Kurama's chakra. Progress feels tangible now in a way it didn't just a few days ago. Real. Sustainable. He doesn't know yet that tomorrow, that fragile sense of controlled progress is about to face its most direct challenge so far, not from another failed attempt, not from another painful backlash, but from the one person in the village whose approval and guidance Naruto has quietly, desperately wanted since this entire journey began. Kakashi has made his decision. Tomorrow, the secrecy ends, one way or another, and depending on how that conversation goes, Naruto might find himself with either the most valuable ally this project could possibly have, or the person most capable of shutting the entire thing down before it goes any further. What happens when Kakashi finally confronts Naruto directly? And will Sasuke's involvement help make the case for continuing? Or will it only convince Kakashi that this project has already spiraled further out of control than anyone realized? Naruto barely has time to form his first Rasengan of the morning before a familiar, lazy voice cuts through the quiet of the clearing. You know, for someone trying to keep a secret, you've picked a training ground with remarkably poor sound insulation. Naruto spins around so fast he nearly loses his footing, the half-formed chakra sphere dissipating instantly in his palm. Kakashi stands at the tree line, hands in his pockets, single visible eye scanning the clearing with an expression that manages to look both casual and deeply, unmistakably serious at the same time. Beside Naruto, Sasuke doesn't startle at all. If anything, his posture straightens slightly, unsurprised, like part of him has been expecting exactly this moment since the day he got back. Kakashi-sensei, Naruto says slowly, guilt written plainly across his face. How long have you? Long enough, Kakashi says, stepping into the clearing at an unhurried pace. Long enough to know this isn't some minor training experiment you've been hiding from Sakura. Long enough to have already had a conversation with Jiraiya-sama about exactly what you found in that vault. He stops a short distance away, gaze flicking briefly towards Sasuke before settling back on Naruto. And long enough to know that Tsunade-sama gave me 3 days to sort this out quietly before she gets involved directly. That deadline is tomorrow, Naruto. Naruto's stomach drops. Tsunade-bachan knows too? She's known since the explosions started drawing Chunin attention, Kakashi says. I asked for time specifically because I didn't want this handled the way it would be handled if it went through official channels first. That courtesy is running out. There's a long, tense silence in the clearing, broken only by a light breeze rustling through the surrounding trees. Naruto glances at Sasuke, who offers no help whatsoever beyond a faint, almost imperceptible nod. An unspoken "just tell him everything" that Naruto reads clearly enough. So he does. Again. The scroll, the vault, Jiraiya's account of Minato's failed attempt, Kurama's theory about sequencing the 3 chakra types rather than forcing them together, the small but genuine progress he's made on the wind integration layer with Sasuke's help. Kakashi listens without interruption, expression unreadable behind his mask, though his single eye tracks every word with an intensity that makes clear he's absorbing far more than his casual posture suggests. When Naruto finally finishes, Kakashi is quiet for a long moment, staring down at the scorched patch of earth where several of Naruto's earlier failed attempts left their mark. "You do understand," Kakashi says finally, "that I watched your father recover from this exact technique." "I was there, Naruto. Not in the clearing when it happened, but in the weeks after, watching him work through physical therapy just to regain basic grip strength in that arm. I have no interest in watching his son go through the same thing." "I'm being careful," Naruto says. "More careful than he was, even." "The sequencing approach is unconfirmed theory," Kakashi cuts in, not unkindly, but firmly. "Built by a tailed beast working from second-hand descriptions of a failure that happened over a decade ago. I'm not dismissing it. I'm telling you that unconfirmed theory and a burned hand are not the same thing as safety." Naruto's jaw tightens, old stubbornness flaring despite the very real respect he holds for his sensei. "So what, you're gonna shut this down? Report it to Tsunade-bachan and have her lock the whole project away again, the way it's been locked away for the last 12 years? "I didn't say that either," Kakashi says, and something in his tone shifts slightly, less confrontational now, more contemplative. "I've had 3 days to think about this, Naruto, and I've come to a conclusion I'm not entirely comfortable with, but one I think is the right call regardless." Naruto blinks, caught off guard by the shift. "Which is, if you're going to do this no matter what anyone says, and having now watched you for the better part of a week, I don't doubt that for a second, then the worst possible outcome isn't you continuing the research. It's you continuing it alone, or with only Sasuke's eyes watching, without any actual medical or structural safety net in place." Kakashi's gaze hardens slightly. "Your father worked on this completely by himself, in secret, with no one supervising, no containment measures, no medical team on standby. That isolation is a huge part of why it went as badly as it did when it finally failed. I'm not willing to let you repeat that particular mistake." "So you're saying?" "I'm saying I'll help," Kakashi says. "Properly. With actual safety protocols this time, containment barriers, medical need on standby, strict limits on how far you push each session. The opposite of how your father approached it. But that offer comes with conditions, Naruto, and I need you to actually hear them before you get excited about the idea." Naruto's chest tightens with something between relief and apprehension. "What conditions?" "First," Kakashi says, holding up a finger, "I need to speak with Tsunade-sama today, and get her direct sign-off on a supervised framework rather than continuing to hide this from her. Second, we do this at an actual secured training ground, not this clearing, somewhere I can set up proper containment measures. Third, and this is non-negotiable, Naruto, the moment I say stop, you stop. No arguing, no pushing for one more attempt. Is that understood?" Naruto nods immediately, something like genuine hope breaking through the tension in his expression for the first time since Kakashi arrived. "Understood. All of it." Kakashi's gaze shifts to Sasuke. "And you? I assume you're staying involved in this?" "If Naruto wants me to," Sasuke says simply. "I do," Naruto says immediately. Kakashi sighs, the sound carrying the particular weight of a man who knows he's making a decision that could go very badly, but has run out of better alternatives. "Then I'll need a day to arrange the proper training ground and get Tsunade-sama's approval formalized. Until then, no training," Naruto finishes, a little reluctantly. "No training," Kakashi confirms. "One day. I promise it'll be worth the wait if it means doing this properly instead of continuing to patch you up out of a first aid kit every few days." One day, as it turns out, is exactly the kind of gap that gives a certain restless, stubborn shinobi entirely too much time to think. Naruto spends the morning attempting, genuinely, to honor Kakashi's instruction, sitting at his kitchen table, notebook open, reviewing his notes on the wind integration layer, discussing quietly with Kurama the theoretical next steps for introducing Sage Chakra once formal training resumes. It's a reasonable plan. A patient plan. Exactly the kind of restraint that would have made Jiraiya proud, had he been there to witness it. But by early afternoon, restlessness has fully set in, and Naruto finds himself staring at his notebook with an itch under his skin that he recognizes all too well, the specific, familiar frustration of feeling like he's so close to real progress and being told to simply wait. I can feel you thinking about it, Kurama says dryly, from somewhere in the back of Naruto's mind. Don't. I'm not doing anything, Naruto says, entirely unconvincingly. You're staring at your notes on Sage Mode integration with an expression I've seen exactly 47 times before, Kit, and it has never once preceded good decision-making. Kakashi-sensei said no training, Naruto points out, a little too quickly, the specific loophole logic already forming. He didn't say I couldn't think about it. Or, test the theory. Somewhere small, just to see. That is precisely the kind of reasoning that gets people injured, Kit, Kurama warns. You gave him your word. I gave him my word about training at the clearing, Naruto mutters, already pulling on his jacket. This is different. Sage Mode entry itself isn't even the dangerous part. I've done that 100 times without any Rasengan involved at all. I'm not gonna attempt the full integration. I just want to see what it feels like to hold Sage Chakra alongside the wind layer I've already stabilized. Barely anything. Just a feel. Naruto. But Naruto is already moving, out the door and across the village towards Sasuke's quarters, a familiar, reckless excitement building in his chest that he hasn't quite managed to talk himself out of despite every warning Kurama is currently throwing his way. Sasuke, to his credit, is considerably less enthusiastic about the idea when Naruto explains it 15 minutes later, standing at his doorway. Kakashi told you to wait, Sasuke says flatly. He told me not to train at the clearing, Naruto says, the loophole logic sounding slightly less convincing out loud than it had in his own head. This isn't really training. It's just a field test. Small, barely anything. Sasuke studies him for a long moment, dark eyes narrowed with obvious skepticism. You do understand that every single disaster in this story so far has started with you describing something as barely anything. This time's different, Naruto insists. That's what you said about the wind layer, right before you gave yourself second-degree burns 5 times in a row. Naruto winces slightly at the reminder, but doesn't back down. Come on, Sasuke. I just want your eyes on it, that's all. If something looks wrong, you tell me, and I stop immediately. I promise. Sasuke is quiet for a long moment, weighing the request against his own better judgment, against the very reasonable voice in his head telling him this is exactly the kind of impulsive decision that got Naruto's hand burned in the first place. But there's also a part of him, the same part that's been genuinely fascinated by this technical problem since the moment he first sensed that unusual chakra residue, that finds itself unable to fully resist the pull of watching what happens when Sage Chakra meets the wind integration layer for the first time. One test, Sasuke says finally, grabbing his jacket. 1. And if I see anything even slightly wrong, we stop immediately, and you actually wait for Kakashi's proper setup tomorrow. Understood? Understood, Naruto says, grinning despite Kurama's continued, muttered disapproval echoing somewhere in the back of his mind. They return to the same familiar clearing, not the secured training ground Kakashi promised for tomorrow, but the remote spot that's become, over the past week, something like Naruto's own personal proving ground. Sasuke takes up his usual observation position, Sharingan already active, while Naruto settles into a steady stance, breathing slow and deliberate as he begins drawing in natural energy around him. Sage Mode settles over him familiar and comfortable, the distinctive orange pigmentation spreading across his eyelids, his own chakra shifting into that heightened, amplified state he's practiced countless times before. This part, at least, genuinely is safe. Nothing about entering Sage Mode itself carries any of the danger inherent to the forbidden technique. The danger begins the moment he starts layering it alongside the wind-integrated Rasengan. Small, Sasuke reminds him, watching closely. The smallest possible thread. Same as you did with the wind layer originally. Naruto nods, forming a standard Rasengan first, then carefully introducing the familiar thread of wind nature that's become second nature to him over the past several days of practice. The sphere holds stable, distortion rippling faintly along its edge exactly as it has dozens of times before. Then, slowly, carefully, Naruto begins drawing a thin thread of sage chakra into the mix. For a moment, just a moment, it actually works. Kit, Kurama's voice rumbles through Naruto's mind, sharp with sudden alertness. The two currents are settling together. The sphere brightens noticeably, the wind distortion along its surface deepening, taking on a slightly golden quality as the sage chakra threads through the existing structure. Naruto's breath catches, genuine excitement flooding through him at the sight of it, actual, tangible proof that Kurama's sequencing theory extends beyond just the first layer. It's working, Naruto breathes, staring at the swirling, gold-tinged sphere in his palm. Sasuke, it's actually. The compression's shifting, Sasuke cuts in sharply, Sharingan tracking something Naruto can't see. The sage chakra is drawing more natural energy than you're accounting for. Pull back now, but the warning comes half a second too late. Sage chakra, as any experienced practitioner knows, doesn't simply sit passively where it's placed. It actively draws an additional natural energy from the surrounding environment, feeding on itself in a way that ordinary chakra doesn't. Naruto's small, careful thread, intended to remain minimal and controlled, begins pulling in more energy than he anticipated, the sphere in his palm swelling rapidly beyond the tight, contained size he'd been maintaining. Naruto, release it now, Kurama's voice roars through his mind, urgent and sharp, but the warning collides with Naruto's own instinctive reaction, not to release the technique, but to try to compensate, to force the expanding sage chakra back into compression through sheer force of will and chakra control. It is, in hindsight, exactly the wrong instinct. The sphere in his palm lurches violently, the two chakra types, wind and sage, previously settling together with surprising harmony, suddenly wrenched into direct competition as Naruto's forced compression collides with the sage chakra's natural tendency to expand and draw in more energy. For one terrifying half-second, Naruto feels the technique fighting itself in his hand, two currents no longer cooperating but actively straining against each other. Naruto, let go, Sasuke shouts, already moving, but there isn't time. The technique detonates, not with the relatively contained force of Naruto's earlier wind-only failures, but something considerably larger, a shockwave of chakra and raw force that tears outward from his palm, cratering the earth beneath him in a wide, scorched circle and sending both Naruto and Sasuke flying backward in opposite directions. Trees at the clearing's edge splinter and crack under the force of it, several toppling outright, and for a long, ringing moment, the world goes white and silent around Naruto before he crashes hard into the dirt several meters away, the impact driving the air from his lungs. When his vision clears, the first thing Naruto registers is pain, his entire right arm, from shoulder to fingertips, throbbing with a deep, bone-level ache that feels entirely different from the surface burns of his earlier failures. He tries to move his fingers and finds them responding sluggishly, a dull, distant tingling suggesting nerve involvement that makes his stomach twist with sudden, genuine fear. Sasuke, he croaks, pushing himself upright despite the protest from every muscle in his body. Sasuke, are you? I'm fine, comes the reply, a short distance away, Sasuke pulling himself to his feet with considerably more composure than Naruto currently manages. A few scrapes and a torn sleeve the only visible damage. His dark eyes immediately snap toward Naruto's arm, narrowing sharply at what he sees. Your arm. Naruto looks down, and feels his stomach drop entirely. The skin along his forearm has darkened in an uneven, mottled pattern, not unlike the description Jiraiya once gave of Minato's own injury all those years ago, and the sluggish response in his fingers is not improving as the initial shock wears off. Kit, Kurama's voice is tight with barely restrained alarm, chakra already flooding urgently through Naruto's system, working to counteract whatever damage the technique's collision inflicted. Hold still. I need to assess the extent of this before you do anything else reckless. How bad is it? Naruto asks, voice tighter than he'd like. Bad enough that I am overriding whatever protest you're about to make and telling you we need Sakura, immediately, Kurama says, and the absence of his usual gruff exasperation in favor of pure Focused urgency tells Naruto everything he needs to know about how seriously the fox is taking this. Sasuke is already moving, one arm bracing Naruto upright, expression tight with a mixture of guilt and focused urgency. I told you this was reckless. I told you. I know, Naruto grits out, the pain sharpening now that the initial numbness is fading. I know, Sasuke. We're going to the hospital, Sasuke says, no room for argument in his tone. Now, the walk back to the village feels considerably longer than it should, Naruto's arm cradled carefully against his chest, each step sending fresh waves of aching discomfort through muscles and pathways that feel wrong in ways his previous burns never quite matched. Sasuke keeps pace beside him, uncharacteristically quiet, jaw tight with obvious tension. They're perhaps halfway back to the village gates when a familiar figure comes into view, moving toward them at a brisk, purposeful pace that immediately shifts into something considerably more urgent the moment Kakashi's single visible eye registers the state of Naruto's arm. What happened? Kakashi says, no longer the measured, patient tone from that morning's confrontation, urgency replacing it entirely as he closes the remaining distance in a few quick strides. I didn't wait, Naruto admits, guilt and pain both plain in his voice. I tested the sage layer. It went wrong. Kakashi's expression darkens, though whatever anger he might reasonably feel gets immediately subsumed beneath more pressing medical concern as he takes in the discoloration along Naruto's forearm, the sluggish, uncertain movement of his fingers. Hospital, Kakashi says shortly. Now. We'll discuss the rest of this once Sakura's had a chance to look at that arm properly. Nobody argues. Sakura's reaction, once they arrive at the hospital and she catches sight of Naruto's arm, is somewhere between professional focus and barely restrained fury, the specific combination that comes from genuine medical concern colliding directly with the frustration of having exactly the situation she warned about several days earlier come true in front of her. Sit, she says, voice clipped, already reaching for diagnostic tools, chakra glowing green at her fingertips as she begins carefully assessing the damage along Naruto's arm. Don't talk yet. Let me see how bad this actually is first. Naruto sits, wincing as her chakra-laced fingers trace carefully along the darkened skin, mapping the extent of what appears to be significant, if not yet catastrophic, pathway strain running from his wrist nearly to his shoulder. The examination takes several long, tense minutes, Kakashi and Sasuke standing nearby, both uncharacteristically silent, before Sakura finally straightens, expression grim but not quite as alarmed as the initial injury suggested it might be. You're lucky, she says finally, addressing Naruto directly. The pathway strain is significant, but it's not the kind of full rupture that would cause permanent damage. Kurama's chakra clearly did a lot of work stabilizing this before I even got my hands on it. Her gaze flicks briefly toward Naruto's midsection, an unspoken acknowledgement toward the fox himself, before returning to the arm. A few days of proper treatment, careful chakra work to fully repair the strained pathways, and you should regain full function. But Naruto, her voice hardens, if that sage chakra thread had pulled an even slightly more natural energy before the collision, we would be having a very different conversation right now. Possibly one involving permanent nerve damage. Naruto swallows, the reality of just how close this came settling in fully now that the adrenaline has worn off. I know. I'm sorry, Sakura-chan. I should have waited. You should have, Sakura agrees, no softness in her tone whatsoever, though her hands remain gentle as she begins the careful chakra work necessary to start repairing the strained pathways. I told you to tell me before it got worse, not after. I know, Naruto repeats quietly. Kakashi, standing at the foot of the hospital bed, exhales a long, heavy breath, running a hand down his masked face in an expression of genuine, weary frustration. One day, he says, more to himself than to anyone else. I asked you to wait one single day, Naruto. I know, Naruto says again, guilt thick in his voice. I'm sorry, Kakashi-sensei. I really am. Kakashi is quiet for a long moment, studying his student's injured arm, the genuine remorse plain in his expression, before finally speaking again, voice heavy but resolved. This is exactly why I wanted proper supervision in place before you attempted anything further, Kakashi says. Not because I don't trust your judgment about the technique itself, Naruto, but because I don't trust your patience. And this, he gestures toward the darkened, strained skin along Naruto's arm, is precisely the outcome that patience was supposed to prevent. I understand, Naruto says, and this time, there's a different quality to the words, not just the reflexive apology of someone caught breaking a promise, but genuine, sobered understanding of exactly how close he came to repeating his father's fate in full. Kakashi studies him for a long moment before nodding slowly. Then let's make sure it doesn't happen again. The supervised training ground will be ready by tomorrow morning, as planned. Tsunade-sama has already given her approval, contingent on strict safety protocols being followed exactly as outlined. Given what just happened, I suspect she'll want to add a few additional conditions once she hears about this. Naruto winces at the thought but nods anyway. Whatever it takes. I mean it this time, Kakashi-sensei. I hope so, Kakashi says quietly. Because the next mistake might not leave you with a strained pathway and a few days of recovery, Naruto. It might leave you exactly where your father was. That evening, resting in a hospital bed with his arm carefully bandaged and elevated, chakra repair session scheduled for the following 2 days before he's cleared for any further activity. Naruto finds himself alone for the first time since the accident, staring up at the ceiling, replaying the collision over and over in his mind. That was close, Kit, Kurama says quietly, none of his usual gruffness present, just quiet, genuine relief threading through the words. Closer than I would like to ever experience again. I know, Naruto says. I really thought it was working, though. For that first second, before it all went wrong, it actually felt like it was coming together. It was, Kurama admits. Briefly. Which is, I suspect, exactly what happened to your father as well, a fleeting moment of genuine cooperation between the chakra types, followed immediately by catastrophic failure once one element behaved in a way neither of you fully anticipated. Sage Chakra's tendency to draw in additional natural energy is not something either of us properly accounted for in our sequencing theory. Naruto absorbs that slowly, turning the failure over in his mind, already, despite the pain, despite the very real fear of how close this came to permanent damage, feeling the familiar pull of wanting to understand exactly what went wrong so it can be corrected. We'll figure it out, Naruto says quietly. Properly this time. With Kakashi-sensei's supervision. We will, Kurama agrees. But Kit, and I say this with as much patience as I have left to offer, the next time someone tells you to wait 1 day, I would very much appreciate it if you actually waited the full day. Naruto manages a weak, tired laugh despite the ache still throbbing along his arm. Yeah. Noted. He closes his eyes, exhaustion finally catching up with him, and drifts towards sleep with the knowledge that tomorrow brings something genuinely new. Not reckless solo experimentation in a hidden clearing, but real, structured, supervised progress, with the combined support of his sensei, his oldest rival, and the fox who has watched over him through every single mistake along the way. It's progress. Real progress, even after tonight's painful setback. But somewhere in the back of his mind, a question lingers that even Kurama's careful theorizing hasn't fully answered yet. If Sage Chakra's unpredictable, expansive nature caused tonight's failure, what happens when the far more volatile, far more powerful presence of tailed beast chakra eventually joins the equation? That answer, it seems, is still a long way off. And given tonight's events, Naruto suspects Kakashi is about to make very sure they take every possible precaution before they get anywhere close to finding out. What does Kakashi's new supervised training framework actually look like? And can Naruto's patience hold long enough to see it through properly this time?